Is there actually a plan for PDI to peg, or are people delusional? 50% say the proof is on chain, it's going to peg. Only 9% say it's a useless meme coin speculation token. And 41% humbly say, I'm not sure. So that's where we're at right now. But in terms of these things, other things reaching parity, okay. So the idea that, and we're going to get into the other PDI stuff and the proposal that the vote is ending here on Friday the 6th. But the idea that PDI is linked by liquidity to both the wrapped Bitcoin, which I don't know where it's at price right now. I think like $1,700 or something. The better Bitcoin on PulseChain and Hex. The fact that PDI is liquidity, has linked in liquidity to both of those, does this alone translate that Hex will get to $1 just because of the simple fact that, I shouldn't say fact, but the theory that PDI obviously would get to $1? How much do you, now obviously I think you've had targets of Hex getting to $1 anyway, regardless of this, but how much do you put into that and PDI being linked in liquidity to Hex getting to $1?
Well, I've had Hex going to $1 way before I even believed anything about the PDI. So
yeah.
Now, because there is, some liquidity bonding, again, I don't think there's, I don't know the numbers of how much liquidity is tied together with it. As far as the pools say how much is there. But I don't think one is going to just pull the other one up, only because Hex has so many other ties. I'm sure there are PulseX, Inc., Pulse. Those three can pull it up along. I know PDI is tied to a lot of things. I don't know if you remember, but when Axis was on, he had the spider webs of all the things that everything is tied to. It's all, the old saying, the rising tide lifts all ships, and it's true. But I think Hex has more of a springboard than PDI at the moment. So I don't know that they'll stay in sync the whole way up. So, but yeah, the thing with PDI is, though, we think it could, once it gets to $1, things could be activated where it stops. Where I don't think Hex stops there.
Well, of course, yeah.
And obviously, if it does get to $1, you've got a lot of things into play then where people would probably transfer out of those dollars and into Hex, PulseX, incentive, those types of things. So it just continues to go. So, it's all a matter of how far do you want to go and how, at what point, because every time it doubles, it's less of an X that you can get, right? So I'm just saying, if you were to buy Hex right now and you were to buy PDI right now, obviously the better return would probably be Hex, because it's going to continue. If you wait till PDI gets to $1, you're going to miss out on a lot of X's that end up making a lot more compounded in the future is what I'm getting at. So,
yeah,
just a thought.
Well, I agree with something that you said earlier, because, talking about like, we were going to get here, but like the Hexes reaching parity versus PulseX and Pulse reaching parity, the PDI liquidity, I think, is already leading to PulseX matching Pulse. And I totally agree with you. I think PulseX is going. I didn't feel this before, but just the more and more, the chart is not an accident. You look at the PulseX Pulse ratio, for a long time, it was clear, and we've talked to this to Axis many times, like the reason that PulseX lagged so much is quite simply just because 3 times the people sacrificed for it, 3 times the amount of money was sacrificed for it. So, that's why we saw that. So for it to just have this ridiculous charge that it has had against Pulse, going the whole way from like 1-to-4 ratio to like 1 to 1.4 right now or something like that, it's I don't think it's an accident. So I 100% think PulseX is going to reach parity with Pulse, whether it's like, they're actually tied together like that, or at least stay together. We'll see. But I think that is definitely coming. And Axis, when he was on just a couple of weeks ago, basically said, we asked about PulseX, and he was like, basically, I think that PulseX is going to do double anything that Pulse does right now, because at that time it was, 1.5 ratio or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I've been DCAing PulseX maybe harder than anything because of that. And I also want to ask you this. I mean, like we keep kind of going around it, but like the hex parity thing, like you're saying that you don't think that that's going to happen, but I kind of think it's going to. And I don't mean like, a marriage where, one can't fall off of where it's at with the other, but I think it is going to make a charge later in the bull market, and we will see eHEX, maybe even at the very end, get very close, if not right to where hex is. And that's why I think, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, because either way, I mean, whether you think that it's going to be pegged or reach parity with hex or not, there still could be a very good opportunity there to DCA because of how low it is against hex. So I'm curious for you, do you like, clearly I think PulseX is like, that's what I want to buy the most in the ecosystem, honestly, right now. But how good of a buy do you think eHEX is? Because, and again, earmuffs for anybody out there that doesn't like to hear this kind of talk. I know it's slanderous, but I mean, how good of a buy do you think it is? Because it is discounted in relation to hex, and I would never go like all in on one. I've never done that. None of us ever advocated any of that. We've never said that on this channel whatsoever. We talked about like just DCAing into both or whatever you want to do. But I do think it is worthwhile and has been worth my while here to DCA to eHEX. So what do you feel about that?
Well, sure. So I think if you're going to go, I don't know, if you're trying to put even amounts in, I would probably cut it into 2/3, maybe. Like, I agree with you. PulseX is where I've also been trying to DCA the most. And I'll be honest, the reason why is because I have the PulseX Pulse liquidity pair, right?
Right.
And I've come up short because PulseX is outperforming Pulse. So I'm very hesitant to sell the incentive because I think it's going to do great things too. And I don't want to lose out on that. So I've been trying to DCA up in the PulseX because that's where my impermanent loss is. So I'm trying to rebuild some of that back without selling the incentive to do it because I want to hang on to it too. But that being said, if I'm putting, say, just for example, you got $400 and, you want to put 100, and then maybe I would split that eHEX PDI between the two or something along those lines. That would be my DCA for those essentially 5 tokens or whatever it was. I'm not saying necessarily PDI, but there's a lot of people talking teddy bear. There's a lot of people talking Pika. There's a lot of people talking just all kind of stuff that they're putting a little moon bag into. I don't think it hurts to have a moon bag of eHEX either. And I don't necessarily wouldn't call it a lottery ticket because I still think it is closer to some of the bigger on ramps. I think people are going to still see that chart from the Ethereum side. Obviously if Uniswap were to happen to decide to relist it, if the hearing goes well and they say, well, we'll put it back on there, and that was maybe whatever, I don't know if they'll do that or not. But there are catalysts that could, easily rocket that up. As far as reaching parity, I think it could get close. I think the purpose of Hex is to stake it, in my opinion. And, not everybody feels the way I do. They want to hold it. They want to be liquid so that they have that opportunity to sell. I'm looking at it more of a long-term play, right? It's more for me, a longer-term savings account. And I obviously do want to take some profits this cycle, so that I can have some to buy back in when it does go down again, at that point, whatever those bottom levels are, and have more ammunition than I had the last time to DCA. because I didn't have a lot of dry powder, coming into this cycle because I was staked out so far with everything. So anyway, that's just my opinion. I would cut a quarter of it in half and go, two of those instead of just one token. So hopefully that answered your question.
I'm going to say it is a controversial opinion. I agree with DeFi Gardner 100%. Not that, like you just said, Ewok, like you still want to have some exposure to ink to see what it's going to do and everything. But, and that, this isn't a one size fits all. It's like whatever your bags are and whatever you want to do. But just like you were saying about DCAing at a PulseX because you're in that yield farm, which I'm also in, I would totally understand people putting some of the free ink that they have earned back into PulseX because, I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what's going to happen at ink, there is still going to be a, I guess, stigma out there that it's like the dump token or the cake token or whatever. And I mean, you look at the chart and it is pretty much down. I mean, it has come up. And again, I'm not saying things aren't going to happen that are good for ink. I think they definitely are. Am I frozen right now or is it just me?
Your camera's frozen, yeah, but I hear you.
But so I understand having like a moon bag of ink or whatever, but if you really want to get back into the ecosystem, like I personally would rather have PulseX right now. So